Junior Archivist Vex'toria's antennae twitched in frustration as she stared at the anomaly in her otherwise perfectly catalogued section. Floating before her was a pristine holographic page labeled "What Not to Do Around Humans." But unlike the trillions of other documents in the Great Galactic Archives, this one was completely blank. "System, explain this discrepancy," she commanded, her 4 spindly arms simultaneously typing on different keyboards. The archives were the pride of the Galactic Confederation, an exhaustive collection of knowledge about every species, planet, historical event, and cultural taboo in the known universe. Blank pages simply didn't exist. Document status, authorized and validated. Content, pending continuous update. Classification, highest importance. The system chirped back. Vex'toria's eye stalks extended in surprise. Highest importance. For an empty document. About humans? Those peculiar bipeds from that unremarkable blue planet were barely a footnote in galactic affairs, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 73 standard cycles ago, practically yesterday in cosmic terms. Request clarification on empty content classification, she persisted. Clarification requires security clearance Omega-9. Vex'toria's chromatophores flashed purple with indignation. She was a level 8 archivist. She had catalogued the mating rituals of the gaseous entities of Belcherix VI and the complete history of the quantum wars. What could possibly be so sensitive about humans that required such clearance? Override request. Archivist code Vex'toria Delta Sigma Attack E. The system paused, then responded. Override accepted based on Special Directive Alpha 3. Transferring you to Grand Archivist Zornblatt. Before Vex'toria could process this unexpected development, her communication panel illuminated with the weathered face of Grand Archivist Zornblatt, whose wrinkled tentacles and faded exoskeleton spoke of centuries of archival work. Junior Archivist Vex'toria, your curiosity about the human document has been logged. It happens to every new archivist eventually, he sighed, a sound like air escaping from ancient bellows. I suppose it's time for your education on the matter. Grand Archivist, I merely sought to correct a system error, Vex'toria explained, her professional pride wounded. No error exists, young one. That page remains blank by unanimous decree of the High Council itself. Vex'toria's secondary heart skipped a beat. The High Council concerned themselves with an archival formatting issue. Zornblatt's laugh resembled grinding gears. Oh, this is far more than formatting. You've stumbled upon what we informally call the human problem. Since you've invoked the override, you're now required to receive the full briefing. He glanced at something off-screen. Fortuitously, we have a human ambassador arriving at Central Station today for the Galactic Cooperation Summit. Report there immediately for observational duty. Observational duty? But I'm an archivist, not field personnel. Precisely why you're perfect for this assignment. You will document what you observe without preconceptions. Perhaps you'll contribute to filling that blank page someday. Zornblatt's expression grew serious. Though truthfully we found documentation rather inadequate for conveying the human experience. As the communication ended, Vex'toria stared back at the floating blank page. All this bureaucratic mystery over humans? The species that her xenoanthropology courses had described as endearingly primitive but surprisingly resilient. She gathered her archival tools and personal effects. Whatever this human problem was, she would approach it with the meticulous objectivity that had earned her a place in the archives. After all, how complicated could one species be in a universe of millions? Little did she know that the answer to that question was the very reason the page remained blank. The central docking bay of Galactic Station Alpha 9 buzzed with more activity than Vex'toria had ever witnessed in her carefully regulated archival chambers. Various species scurried about in preparation. Maintenance drones polished already gleaming surfaces, security orbs patrolled with heightened vigilance. And a delegation of diplomats from 17 different worlds stood in perfect formation, ranked precisely by their species' date of entry into the Galactic Confederation. Protocol Officer Glexnar, a gelatinous being who maintained shape only through the assistance of an anti-gravity exosuit, oozed nervously as he reviewed procedures on his datapad. The human vessel will dock in exactly 7.3 minutes, he announced to the assembly. Remember, everyone, no sudden movements, no exposed feeding appendages, and absolutely no idioms. Humans find our literal translations confusing and occasionally offensive. Vex'toria positioned herself discreetly behind a pillar, recording device at the ready. She had reviewed the available data on humans during her journey from the archives bipedal mammals with concerning water content, alarmingly exposed sensory organs, and disturbingly varied pigmentation. Their civilization had somehow survived despite their biological fragility and their baffling tendency to establish colonies in actively hostile environments. A mechanical voice announced, "Attention, Earth diplomatic vessel probably a bad idea requesting docking permission." Glexnar's entire body rippled with alarm. Why would they name their ship that? Is it a threat? A warning? He composed himself with visible effort. Permission granted. Standard welcome protocols engaged. The sleek human ship eased into the docking bay with surprising grace for such primitive technology. As the airlock cycled, the delegation stood at attention, their translator implants humming with anticipation. The door slid open, and out stepped a completely average-looking human male in a rumpled suit carrying what appeared to be a disposable beverage container. "Hey there, space friends. Sorry about the timing. Earth traffic control is still figuring out how to navigate the rings of Saturn without causing interplanetary incidents." He took a long sip from his container before continuing. Ambassador Jack Murphy, representing the terrifying and mysterious humans. "Don't worry, I left my ray gun and space helmet at home." Vex'toria noted the confusion rippling through the delegation. The ambassador's casual demeanor violated at least 12 diplomatic protocols before he'd even fully exited his ship. Glexnar moved forward, performing the traditional 17-movement greeting sequence. "Esteemed Ambassador Murphy, we welcome you to Galactic Station Alpha 9 with open appendages and clear respiratory pathways." Ambassador Murphy stared for a moment, then smiled. "Thanks. High five?" He raised his hand. The delegation froze in collective horror. Vex'toria quickly consulted her database. Was this some form of combat challenge? Glexnar later worked overtime before he tentatively extended a gelatinous pseudopod. Murphy slapped it gently, causing ripples through Glexnar's entire form. "Perfect. We're going to get along great," Murphy declared, seemingly oblivious to the diplomatic catastrophe unfolding. He turned to address the entire delegation. "Listen, I know you all expected someone in a fancy uniform with perfect posture and a stick up their well. Wherever your species keeps sticks, but Earth decided to try something different this time. Last 3 ambassadors came home with stress disorders from trying to follow your 17,000 protocols, so they sent me instead." "And what are your qualifications, Ambassador Murphy?" asked Diplomat Zal, a crystalline being whose facets reflected light in patterns indicative of extreme anxiety. "Oh, I was a bartender at an international spaceport bar on Earth. Figured if I could handle drunk tourists from 60 different countries, 7 alien species couldn't be much harder." He shrugged. "Plus, I make a mean martini." Vex'toria's recording device nearly slipped from her grasp. The humans had sent a beverage dispenser as their diplomatic representative. She began to understand why the archives might have trouble categorizing proper interactions with this species. "Ambassador, perhaps we should proceed to your quarters before the formal reception," Glexnar suggested desperately. "Sounds good. Lead the way, Jello shot." Murphy started following, then paused beside Vex'toria's pillar. "And who's our lurking friend with all the eyeballs?" Every member of the delegation turned to stare at Vex'toria, who felt her chromatophores flush with embarrassment. "Junior Archivist Vex'toria," she admitted, stepping forward. "I've been assigned to observe human diplomacy for the archives." Murphy's face broke into a wide smile. "An archivist. Perfect. Someone who'll write down all the ridiculously complicated things you folks do so. The next poor sap from Earth has half a chance of not causing an interstellar incident before lunch." He extended his hand toward her. "Stick with me, Vex. I've got a feeling this is going to be an educational experience for both of us." As Vex'toria reluctantly took his hand in her upper right appendage, she couldn't help but notice the alarmed expressions on the faces of the diplomatic corps. Whatever this human was about to do on their pristine station, it certainly wouldn't be boring. And somehow she suspected that blank page in the archives might soon have its first entry. The diplomatic reception was proceeding with the exact precision and rigid formality that defined Galactic Confederation events. Representatives from 87 worlds mingled in carefully choreographed patterns, exchanging pleasantries according to the prescribed interaction matrices. Vex'toria observed from a designated neutral corner, her recording device discreetly capturing Ambassador Murphy's every move. Murphy, to his credit, was making an admirable effort to follow Glexnar's whispered instructions. He had mostly mastered the art of the 7-point introduction and had only accidentally insulted 3 minor species, a record low for human diplomats, according to the archives. "Your atmospheric preference station is most innovative," Murphy commented to Ambassador Zorak of Titan, who floated in a cloud of methane within a containment field. "On Earth we'd call that hotboxing, but way more sophisticated." Vex'toria winced. But Zorak's translator apparently smoothed over whatever cultural misstep had just occurred. It was then that High Commander Krell of the Draconian Empire entered the reception, standing nearly 3 meters tall with armored scales and an impressive ridge of spines down his back. Krell commanded immediate deference from the assembled diplomats. The Draconians were among the oldest members of the Confederation, renowned for their martial prowess and rigid honor code. "So that's the human representative," Krell rumbled, his voice causing ripples in nearby beverages. "Smaller than I expected." Murphy turned, craning his neck to look up at the imposing figure. "And you must be the space dragon I was briefed about." "Soon, gotta say." The descriptions didn't do you justice. "Those scales are spectacular. Do you wax them, or is that a natural shine?" A deadly silence fell over the reception. Vex'toria's recording device automatically switched to emergency backup as she prepared to document what would surely be a diplomatic catastrophe. But instead of offense, Krell's reptilian features arranged themselves into what might have been amusement. "You speak boldly for a soft-skinned mammal, Ambassador Murphy." "The occupational hazard of being human," Murphy replied with a shrug. "We compensate for our squishiness with a surplus of attitude." "Indeed. Your species' reputation for unpredictability has reached even the Draconian homeworlds." Krell leaned down, his massive head now level with Murphy's. "Though I wonder if the stories of human resilience are merely propaganda to mask your obvious physiological shortcomings." Murphy's eyebrows raised. "Is that a challenge I hear, Commander?" "Perhaps. Draconians believe true diplomatic relations can only be established after measuring one's adversaries." "Well then," Murphy grinned, "how do you propose we measure each other? I left my ruler in my other space pants." Krell's translator took a moment to process this. Then the commander let out a sound like grinding boulders that Vex'toria eventually recognized as laughter. "A contest, human. Your choice of battlefield." Murphy glanced around the reception, then pointed to a refreshment table. "How about we keep it simple? A drinking contest. The first one to give up loses." Vex'toria frantically consulted her database. Human recreational consumption of ethanol was documented. But surely Murphy realized that draconian biochemistry would give Krell an insurmountable advantage. Draconians processed toxins at 20 times the rate of a human. "Acceptable," Krell declared. "Though I should warn you, human alcohol is like water to my kind." "Oh, I wasn't thinking of alcohol," Murphy replied casually. "Let's make this interesting. I'll drink whatever your bartender recommends for you, and you drink what I'd normally order." The gathered diplomats murmured in shock. Even Krell seemed taken aback by this proposal, which violated every safety protocol in the Confederation's extensive xenobiological consumption guidelines. "Ambassador," Glexnar oozed forward anxiously, "cross-species consumption is strictly regulated for medical safety." "Relax," Glex Murphy interrupted. "My species makes a hobby of consuming things that might kill us. It's practically our national pastime. I've got artificial kidneys and a synthetic liver installed specifically for diplomatic functions." Vex'toria made a note to verify this claim against human medical records. Could they really replace organs so casually? Krell considered for a moment, then nodded his massive head. Your terms are acceptable, human. We shall see who truly possesses superior constitution. Within minutes, the reception had transformed. Diplomatic formalities were forgotten as representatives formed a circle around a table where Murphy and Krell sat facing each other. Vex'toria positioned herself for an optimal recording angle. The first round began. Murphy was presented with a bubbling green liquid that occasionally emitted sparks. Draconian fire bile, the server explained, typically used to dissolve spacecraft hull plating in emergencies. Without hesitation, Murphy raised the glass, bottoms up. He downed it in one go, then slammed the empty glass down, his face contorting briefly before settling into a strained smile. Tasty. Notes of battery acid with a hint of molten lead. Krell was served a simple brown liquid, human whiskey, Murphy explained, aged 12 years in charred oak barrels. The commander examined it suspiciously before consuming it. He showed no reaction whatsoever. Round 1 complete, declared Glexnar, who had somehow become the contest's official moderator. By round 4, a noticeable pattern had emerged. Krell remained stoic, though Vex'toria's sensors detected elevated temperature around his throat scales. Murphy, meanwhile, had turned an alarming shade of red but remained upright despite consuming substances that should have dissolved his esophagus. Remarkable adaptation, whispered a nearby xenobiologist. His species must have evolved on a planet of toxins. Round 7 brought dramatic developments. Murphy was served a swirling black substance that actually ate through the bottom of the glass before he could drink it. He somehow managed to swallow it directly from the air. Not bad, he gasped, smoke emanating from his nostrils. Reminds me of my college roommate's cooking. Krell, meanwhile, faced a shot of something Murphy called tequila. For the first time, the mighty Draconian showed distress, his scales briefly changing color. By the void, Krell rumbled. What manner of poison is this? Just fermented agave cactus with a bit of salt and lime, Murphy replied innocently. Popular at human social gatherings. By round 10, the impossible happened. Krell, mighty warrior of the Draconian Empire, swayed in his seat after consuming something called a prairie fire. With a rumbling groan, he conceded defeat. I yield, human. Your species' capacity for self-poisoning exceeds even Draconian military legends. The room erupted in astonished murmurs. Vex'toria's recording device was capturing every historic moment. Never in Confederation history had a Draconian commander been bested in any form of physical contest. As medics rushed to both contestants, Murphy politely declining while Krell was escorted to the medical bay, Vex'toria found herself making the first entry in her notes for the mysterious blank page. Rule 1. Never challenge a human to a drinking contest. Their recreational activities include voluntary poison consumption, and their digestive systems have evolved accordingly. She couldn't help but notice that several other diplomats were making similar notes in their own devices. Perhaps the blank page wouldn't remain empty for long. The day after the legendary drinking contest, Vex'toria arrived at Ambassador Murphy's quarters to find him remarkably functional, despite having consumed substances that could corrode starship hulls. Morning, Vex. He greeted her cheerfully, ready for another day of human-alien awkwardness. Ambassador Murphy, your vital signs indicate you should be deceased, she noted, her scanners confirming he was somehow alive and relatively healthy. Nah, just a slight hangover. Nothing a cup of coffee and some aspirin can't fix. He gestured to a dark beverage that smelled alarmingly similar to industrial lubricant. I want some. Ian. I must decline. My species processes caffeine as a hallucinogenic neurotoxin. Murphy paused mid-sip. Note to self, no coffee for the archive lady with the cool eye stalks. Their first official meeting that day was with the representatives of the Photosynthetic Collective, a consortium of plant-based intelligences. The representatives, essentially sophisticated walking trees, had arranged themselves in the conference room to maximize exposure to the artificial sunlight. Ambassador Murphy, their spokesplant, began, Franz waving gently. We understand humans also evolved from a carbon-based photosynthetic ancestry. Murphy blinked. Not exactly. We're more like mobile composting units that turn plants into energy. The translator must have malfunctioned, because the plant beings suddenly withdrew their fronds in what Vex'toria recognized as extreme horror. You consume our ancestors? The spokesplant trembled. Well, when you put it that way, Murphy started. A plant murderer, shrieked one of the younger saplings. What followed was chaos as the entire photosynthetic delegation attempted to flee the room from the terrifying human predator. Murphy, trying to help, called out, "Don't leave. Leave. It was just a misunderstanding." Vex'toria made her second note. Rule 2. Never let humans make plant puns around photosynthetic species. Also, do not mention salad. Later that afternoon, during trade negotiations with the Mercantile Guild of Proxima Centauri, Murphy casually mentioned that humans like to drive a hard bargain. The Proximans, whose translation software took this literally, immediately called for security, believing Murphy was threatening to pilot a dense object into their delegation. I meant we like to negotiate thoroughly. Murphy protested as security drones surrounded him. Vex'toria added a third note. Rule 3. Human idioms translate poorly and may be interpreted as threats of violence. By mid-afternoon, Murphy had inadvertently proposed marriage to an asexual silicon-based diplomat by complementing their crystalline structure. He started a theological crisis among the hive consciousness of Betelgeuse by suggesting they think for themselves. He terrified the aquatic representatives by describing Earth's fishing industry. I swear I'm trying to be diplomatic, Murphy sighed as they retreated to a quiet corner after the fourth incident. But everything I say seems to cause some kind of interspecies incident. Your species communicates in ways fundamentally incompatible with standard translation protocols, Vex'toria observed. You rely heavily on contextual implications, emotional subtext, and cultural references. You mean we're confusing? Right, profoundly. Yet inexplicably effective, she reviewed her notes. Despite today's incidents, you've secured 3 trade agreements and a defense pact that previous ambassadors failed to achieve in years of negotiation. Murphy looked surprised. I have? Indeed. The photosynthetic collective has agreed to supply oxygen enrichment technology in exchange for a promise that no human will ever visit their homeworld. The Proximans were so impressed by your aggressive negotiation stance that they offered preferential trading terms. And the hive. Consciousness is now experimenting with individual thought patterns inspired by your suggestion. So, I'm succeeding by failing. You are succeeding by being human. Vex'toria corrected. It appears chaos is your natural diplomatic strategy. Murphy laughed. Wait until they see us trying to be chaotic on purpose. That evening, at a formal dinner with the High Council, Murphy managed to maintain protocol for nearly 20 minutes before disaster struck again. When served the ceremonial dish of unity, a living mollusk that was meant to be admired, and then released, Murphy mistook it for an appetizer and ate it. The horrified gasps around the table made it clear this was a severe breach of protocol. Ambassador Murphy has consumed the sacred symbol, High Councillor Zor announced, voice quivering with shock. Murphy, mouth still full, managed to say, "Is that bad?" "It is unprecedented," Zor replied. After an emergency consultation among the council members, they reached a surprising conclusion. The ancient texts specified that the sacred symbol must be taken within oneself as a sign of unity. Technically, Murphy had fulfilled this requirement more literally than anyone in history. The human way is different, but acceptable, Zor declared, to everyone's relief. As they left the dinner, Murphy whispered to Vex'toria, "Did I just accidentally create a new diplomatic tradition?" "I believe you did," she confirmed, adding to her notes, Rule 4. Human misunderstandings occasionally result in improved protocols. The universe help us all. By the end of the day, word of the unpredictable human ambassador had spread throughout the station. Some diplomats now actively sought Murphy out, curious about what bizarre human behavior they might witness. Others scheduled their meetings specifically to avoid him. "I'm becoming a diplomatic tourist attraction," Murphy observed. "You are becoming a case study," Vex'toria corrected. "The blank page in our archives is accumulating entries rapidly." "There's a blank page about humans. It is titled What Not to Do Around Humans. Though perhaps it should be renamed What Humans Might Do That Defies All Logic and Protocol." Murphy grinned. "Now that's a title I can live up to." On the fourth day of Ambassador Murphy's visit, alarms blared throughout Galactic Station Alpha 9. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors as Vex'toria rushed to the central command hub, where she found Murphy already present among the gathered officials. "What's happening?" she asked, joining him at the outer edge of the chaos. "Some kind of space anomaly," Murphy explained, gesturing to the massive viewscreen displaying a swirling vortex of energy near the station. "It appeared out of nowhere about 20 minutes ago and is growing." High Counselor Zor stood at the center of the command hub, surrounded by advisors and scientists presenting data at a dizzying rate. "The quantum fluctuation is increasing exponentially," announced Chief Scientist Mirok, their tentacles manipulating holographic charts. "At current expansion rates, it will engulf the station in approximately 47 minutes. "Evacuation protocols?" Zor inquired. "The anomaly is disrupting our jump drives," replied Fleet Commander Trisk. "Escape vessels cannot safely navigate through the distortion field." "Then we shall implement contingency protocol Zeta 9, Zor declared, activating a communication panel. "This is High Counselor Zor. All station personnel are instructed to proceed to designated safety zones and await further instructions while the Council deliberates on appropriate measures." Murphy leaned toward Vex'toria. "Did he just say they're going to have a meeting about this?" "Standard procedure," she confirmed. "The Contingency Assessment Committee will evaluate all possible solutions according to the risk mitigation hierarchy before implementing any actionable response." "And how long does that usually take?" "For a Class 1 spatial anomaly?" "Approximately 3 to 4 hours." Murphy's jaw dropped. "But we only have 47 minutes. Hence why this will be an emergency abbreviated session." Murphy stared at her, then at the swirling vortex on the screen, then back at the council members who were now arranging themselves in order of seniority around a conference table that had emerged from the floor. "This is insane," he muttered, pushing forward through the crowd. "Excuse me, High Counselor." Zor looked up, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Ambassador Murphy, please proceed to Safety Zone 7 with the other diplomatic personnel. This is a matter for the Contingency Assessment Committee." "With all due respect, Counselor, we don't have time for a committee. That thing is going to swallow this station before you finish taking attendance." The command hub fell silent, shocked by this breach of protocol. "Ambassador," Zor replied stiffly, "I understand humans have a tendency toward impulsive action, but the Galactic Confederation has survived for millennia by adhering to established procedures." "Procedures won't mean much if we're all sucked into whatever that thing is," Murphy interrupted, pointing at the screen. "Look, what exactly is that anomaly, in simple terms?" Chief Scientist Mirok reluctantly answered. "It appears to be a quantum entanglement cascade failure, possibly triggered by an intersection of dimensional boundaries." "And what have you tried to stop it?" "We have initiated standard containment scans and deployed observation probes to gather sufficient data for analysis." "But you haven't actually done anything to stop it," Murphy concluded. "One cannot just stop a quantum entanglement cascade." Mirok's tentacles writhed in scientific indignation. "It requires precise calculations, carefully calibrated countermeasures, extensive simulations." Or, Murphy interrupted again, a sufficiently disruptive counterforce introduced directly at the focal point. The scientists exchanged glances. Theoretically, Mirok admitted, but the energy requirements would be astronomical, and the delivery mechanism would need to withstand forces that would tear apart any known material in the Confederation. Murphy rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What about the antimatter containment units from my ship's engine?" If we removed the safety regulators and created a cascading overload timed to detonate at the anomaly's center. Horrified gasps echoed through the command hub. That would violate 73 safety protocols, exclaimed Safety Officer Grell. Antimatter containment systems are triple secured specifically to prevent such catastrophic misuse. Yeah, well, imminent death tends to make safety protocols negotiable, Murphy replied. Look, I can modify my ship's containment system. I just need access to the engineering bay in maybe 20 minutes. Absolutely not, Watt declared. We cannot risk further destabilization through untested human improvisations. Vex'toria, who had been quietly analyzing the situation, stepped forward. High Counselor, my records indicate 17 previous quantum anomalies encountered by Confederation vessels. In 16 cases, committee deliberation exceeded the time available before catastrophic failure. An uncomfortable silence followed her statement. The archives do not lie, she added quietly. Murphy seized the opening. Give me 20 minutes in engineering with whoever your best technical people are. If my idea doesn't work, you can go back to your meeting, and we'll all die with proper paperwork filed. Saw hesitated, his 7 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme stress. Finally, he nodded. Chief Engineer Dralax, assign your team to assist the human. The rest of the committee will continue standard protocols in parallel. What followed was 20 minutes of the most chaotic engineering Vex'toria had ever witnessed. Murphy, jacket discarded and sleeves rolled up, moved through the engineering bay like a whirlwind of barely contained energy. He ignored safety procedures, bypassed authorization requirements, and combined technologies that were explicitly labeled as incompatible. This violates every engineering principle in the Galactic Code, protested Engineer Dralax. Trust me, this is how we fix things on Earth, Murphy replied, rewiring a critical system with his bare hands. Half improvisations, half prayer, with a dash of this might actually kill us all, but we're dead anyway, so who cares? Vex'toria carefully documented everything, adding to her growing list. Rule 5, human engineering ignores safety protocols in favor of functional results, especially under pressure. Exactly 18 minutes later, Murphy emerged from the bowels of his modified ship, grinning despite smears of mechanical fluid on his face. It's ready. We need to launch now. The vessel, now more of a guided missile than a diplomatic transport, launched toward the heart of the anomaly. The command hub watched in tense silence as the small ship approached the swirling vortex. Detonation in 5, 4, 3, counted mission control. Murphy, standing beside Vex'toria, whispered, "This might get a bit flashy." The explosion that followed was visible despite the vacuum of space, a brilliant burst of energy that seemed to cancel out the swirling vortex. For a terrifying moment, the station shook violently as the shockwave hit. Then, gradually, sensors indicated the anomaly was collapsing. "It's working," announced Mirok, tentacles dancing across control panels. "The quantum entanglement is reversing." 3 minutes later, where the threatening vortex had been, there was nothing but normal space, sprinkled with a beautiful nebula of dispersing particles. The command hub erupted in celebrations, all except the High Council, who appeared distinctly uncomfortable with this unorthodox resolution. "While we appreciate Ambassador Murphy's assistance," Osor stated carefully, "I must emphasize that proper protocols exist for a reason. In the future." In the future. In the future, Murphy interrupted with a smile, "You might want to add a new protocol. When facing imminent destruction, ask if there's a human around with a bad idea." Vex'toria made another note. Rule 6, human solutions often create new problems, but sometimes those problems are preferable to the original crisis. As the celebration continued around them, Murphy turned to her. "So how's that blank page looking now?" "Considerably less blank," she admitted. "Though I'm beginning to understand why it remained empty for so long." "Oh? Why's that?" "Because trying to create rules about humans is like trying to catalog chaos. The moment you think you understand the pattern, it changes." Murphy laughed. "That's the nicest thing anyone's said about humanity in a long time." 2 weeks after the quantum anomaly incident, Junior Archivist Vex'toria sat across from Grand Archivist Zorn Blatt in his private chambers deep within the Galactic Archives. There between them hovered the still mostly blank page titled What Not to Do Around Humans. "Your observational reports have been illuminating," Zorn Blatt admitted, his ancient tentacles idly sorting through holographic data. "Though I note you've only added 6 entries to the document." 6 verified entries, Vex'toria corrected. "I collected sufficient data for at least 30 more, but could not conclusively establish them as universal human traits rather than Ambassador Murphy's personal idiosyncrasies." "A wise distinction." Zorn Blatt nodded approvingly. "The archives value accuracy above comprehensiveness." "However," Vex'toria continued, her eye stalks extending slightly in what her colleagues would recognize as academic excitement, "I believe I've identified why this document has remained functionally blank, despite 73 standard cycles of human interaction with the Confederation." "Oh." Zorn Blatt leaned forward, genuinely curious. "The document's fundamental premise is flawed," she stated. "We cannot create a definitive guide on what not to do around humans, because humans themselves constantly redefine what is acceptable, dangerous, offensive, or laudable." She activated her personal data terminal, displaying footage from Murphy's 2-week visit. Observe, when Ambassador Krell of the Draconian Empire challenged Ambassador Murphy to a drinking contest, it created what should have been a diplomatic incident. Instead, it resulted in the first non-aggression pact between Draconians and humans in history. Another clip played, Murphy accidentally causing a panic among the photosynthetic collective. Here, a catastrophic cultural misunderstanding somehow led to the most favorable trade agreement the collective has ever offered to a non-photosynthetic species. More clips followed, each showing Murphy violating protocols, creating chaos, then somehow transforming the situation into an unexpected positive outcome. In short, Vex'toria concluded, attempting to create rules about human interaction is counterproductive. The only consistent pattern is their inconsistency. Zorn Blatt remained silent for a long moment, then emitted the wheezing sound that passed for laughter among his species. "You've discovered in 2 weeks what the High Council has debated for decades. Humans defy categorization by design. Then why maintain this document at all?" Vex'toria asked, gesturing to the floating blank page. "Because its emptiness is itself the most accurate statement we can make," Zorn Blatt replied. "The blank page serves as a warning to all diplomats and xenoanthropologists when dealing with humans. Prepare for the unexpected." Vex'toria considered this. A meta-document whose lack of content is its content. Philosophically elegant, if bureaucratically frustrating. Indeed, Zorn Blatt's eye stalks bobbed in agreement. "However, I've been authorized by the High Council to implement your recommendation for amending the document." "My recommendation?" Vex'toria's chromatophores flashed in surprise. "I wasn't aware I'd made one." Zorn Blatt gestured with 3 tentacles simultaneously, and the blank document transformed. The title What Not to Do Around Humans dissolved and reformed as Observations on Human Interaction, a living document. "The Council was most impressed with your insight that human behavior exists in a constant state of adaptive flux," Zorn Blatt explained. "Instead of attempting to create rigid guidelines which would inevitably fail, they've approved creating an observational database. Each diplomatic encounter will add to our understanding without presuming to define limits." The floating document began populating with categorized observations, including Vex'toria's 6 verified entries alongside thousands of others collected over decades but never formally organized. "This is an unprecedented change in xenodiplomatic protocol," Vex'toria stammered, her auxiliary respiratory vents fluttering in what her species recognized as profound professional satisfaction. "Change is necessary when facing a species that thrives on it," Zorn Blatt replied. Ambassador Murphy demonstrated this repeatedly during his visit. Which brings me to my next point. The ancient archivist's pigmentation shifted to the formal tones of official business. "The Human Diplomatic Corps has requested your reassignment as Confederation liaison to Earth Station Alpha." Vex'toria's central eye dilated dramatically. "Me?" But I'm only a junior archivist with minimal field experience. Ambassador Murphy specifically requested you, Zornblatt continued, clearly amused. His exact words were, I need someone who understands that trying to put humans in a box is like trying to nail jelly to a wall, messy, pointless, and you just end up with sticky walls. I don't understand that metaphor, Vex'toria admitted. Neither do I, Zornblatt chuckled. But understanding that we don't need to understand everything about humans to work effectively with them is precisely why you're qualified. The ability to observe without preconceived notions is rare and valuable. Vex'toria's mind raced through the implications at diplomatic posting. With humans, the chaotic, confounding, fascinating species that had upended centuries of carefully established protocols in just a few decades. Will you accept the assignment? Zornblatt asked. Vex'toria glanced at the newly transformed document, watching as it organized and reorganized information in real time, adapting to new inputs just as humans adapted to new situations. Yes, she decided. But I have one condition. Zornblatt's eye ridges raised in surprise, which is that we maintain one section titled What Not to Do Around Humans containing exactly one entry. Vex'toria extended a manipulator appendage, and with proper authorization, added to the document. 1. Do not assume you know what not to do around humans. Zornblatt's laughter echoed through the ancient halls of the archives, startling several passing scholars. Approved, Liaison Vex'toria. Most enthusiastically approved. As Vex'toria left the Grand Archivist's chambers to prepare for her new assignment, she couldn't help but wonder what chaotic diplomatic incidents awaited her on Earth Station Alpha, and more importantly, how those inevitable disasters might transform into unexpected opportunities. After all, if there was one thing Ambassador Murphy had taught her, it was that human unpredictability was their greatest strength. And perhaps with time it might become one of the Confederation's greatest strengths as well.